Audible. Audible is offering our listeners at Psychedelics Today a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/psychedelics today and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. So all you have to do is just check out the title, download it, and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/psychedelics today to get started. And there are some really great psychedelic titles on Audible. For example, True Hallucinations by Terence McKenna, The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, Safe, Therapeutic, and Sacred Journeys by Dr. James Fadiman, How to Change Your Mind, What the New Science of Psychedelics Teaches Us About Consciousness, Dying, Addiction, Depression, and Transcendence by Michael Pollan, and one that I actually downloaded recently, DMT and the Soul of Prophecy by Dr. Rick Strassman. So there are a lot of great psychedelic titles on Audible, so be sure to check it out. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/psychedelics today. That's audibletrial.com/psychedelics today for your free audiobook. And hopefully it's in the psychedelic realm.
Hello and welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. I hope you're having a beautiful day. Today on the show, Kyle and I interview two folks from a really interesting organization, the Eugene Center for Ethnobotanical Services. Really interesting nonprofit. They've got a botanical demonstration garden with a number of psychoactive plants. We get into Kratom. We get into the decriminalization of psychedelic plants quite a bit in this episode. It's a really, really cool organization. I think they're going to be really making some waves. If you don't know already, Eugene, Oregon's a beautiful town and already quite psychedelically oriented. So it's a great place to have that organization. And, you know, as with any place, it always helps to have a physical presence where you can kind of engage with perhaps people who haven't totally understood the psychedelic conversation and all that. So it's a really fun podcast we had. I really hope you guys like it. Really quick, I want to read you the mission, a little bit of the mission. So the EDELIC Center for Ethnobotanicals Services, ECFES, it's a 501c3 for promoting global awareness of and local accessibility to organic potent ethnobotanicals. The EDELIC Center in Eugene works with the research and practitioner community to educate the public on safety around medicinal plants, modernize psychopharmacopoeia protocols, and champion the individual's right to access whole plants for health and healing. That's just part of it, but there's a social equity piece, and they've got a really interesting board. I think Mountain Girl is on there. If you don't know Mountain Girl, Google her. So really cool stuff. So if you want to support the show, leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook or whatever app you use to do podcasting. We'd love it. We'd really appreciate it. And just sharing with your friends would be helpful. And we launched our therapist, Navigating Psychedelics today. Actually recording this just after that class. We had people from Australia, Northern Ireland, all over the US and Canada. And it's going to be a really cool global course. I'm very excited to have so many global perspectives and just really dig in. And if you weren't aware, we've got a clinician's course for just kind of a foundation of psychedelic education called Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists. So if you're interested in that, check it out. It's a live series. You can find out more at psychedelicstoday.com under online ed or psychedelicstoday.teachable.com. We'd love to learn with you. It's a really fun project, and it's kind of the most fun I've had since starting this project is actually teaching folks live. So you get like all of the courses, the master courses and core curriculum that Kyle and I built over the course of a few years. And then we get 5 live class sessions with Kyle and I, and we get to dig into what you learned in class and questions you have, generally or about the course content. So learning in a group is always helpful. Kyle and I might not know every answer, so having everybody there with us is great. It kind of diffuses responsibility, and people get to share their expertise a little bit, and it's just a really great learning situation. So check it out, psychedelicstay.com, online ed. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you at the end of the episode.
All right, welcome back to Psychedelics Today, everybody. Today we're joined with Rachel Anderson and James Franzo from the EDELIC Center for
Ethnobotanicals.
Ethnobotanicals. I keep wanting to say entheogen. That's why. It's just welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Awesome. Do you guys want to give a little bit of background about who you are?
Right. So we're a nonprofit 501c3 in Eugene, Oregon, and we've been operating for 4 years. We started as a public lending library, and we have probably a collection of about 500 books on the topics of psychedelics and beyond. And we serve the Eugene surrounding areas. We also put together a weekly discussion group and film documentaries and put on events for the public, and kind of are working now in a direction of policy a bit. And I'll let James speak a bit about that.
Hi, I'm James. I'm one of the co-founders of the organization. And yeah, we've been a small group of people that started around this library collection. And then slowly people that thought they might be able to contribute in some way, shape, or form came. So it was like one person came at a time. And it essentially grew from the books to a conservatory where we were cultivating and protecting some of the plants, to a fairly large online database that was archiving the kind of resurgence psychedelic renaissance, so to speak. And then it also started shifting into some scientific research studies that are really small and pilot at this stage, but we're focusing on citizen-led and citizen interest in terms of what we would like to research. So it's a little bit different than the top-down medical model. So we do a lot of listening to our community, and we try to hear what people are interested in learning about. And with the library, we can direct them to books. With the website, we can redirect them to certain periods of time in history. And with the conservatory, people have the opportunity to come and sit and experience the plants in a natural habitat as well. And our overall goal is to bring all of that under one roof and to create a small ethnobotanical center.
That's really awesome. The history of it's pretty interesting. I was listening to your interview that you sent over by one of your board members, Vip Short, and just this idea of putting together this library, having these books and needing like a place to actually like house them. And I don't know, I thought that was just like a really interesting way to kind of get started.
Yeah, we kind of got pushed from behind and pulled into it in a sense, because there was 2 or 3 community members that had books that we were just trying to donate. We had all these old volumes of psychedelic texts, and we both had agreed, hey, let's just donate these to a library or something. And so we went to different organizations around the city, assuming somebody would take it as an intact collection. But everywhere we went, it was like 2013, 14-ish, and everybody was kind of like, psychedelic, not really there. They didn't want that collection. So we said, well, let's just put it up on a website and then let people see that it exists. But we didn't really anticipate all the other stuff that came afterwards. People coming and land donation for a conservatory space and things like that. That all just happened organically by putting up
That's amazing.
There's all these books that are available. So it's been fun to meet so many people and have it be this kind of unplanned, organically evolving structure.
That's really cool. Like cool synchronicities, and it's kind of like, you build it and then, just something starts forming organically. I mean, that's just really interesting to kind of stick with the process, right? And just, you have no idea where it's really going to lead to.
Yeah.
I'm sure it got a little creepy at times, right? When all these people start coming to you and you're like, how do I make sure I'm safe here? All sorts of stuff I can imagine coming up, especially now that you've got do you have an active conservatory?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you speak about what that looks like?
Well, it's fairly small. It's a demonstration garden, so I think we have 15 to 16 different psychoactive species, and it's a kind of place you can come in, look at the plants. It's just single specimens, so we have everything from Kratom tree to sassafras tree to San Pedro cactuses on
Salvia divinorum,
and it's small. And what volunteers are able to do is come out, help out in the garden. And then if we have extra cuttings, things like that, they can take them home. It's really, the idea is a decentralized place where people can start cultivating their own relationships with the plants. That's kind of always been the focus. And it's why we focused on plants, because they're, pretty much anybody can do it. I mean, if you can grow basil, you can grow most of these ethnobotanical plants.
So salvia is actually not that hard to grow. Is that the point here, or part of the point? Like, I've always heard it's complicated and difficult to grow from cuttings.
Well, we started off with a mother plant, and she did end up not hanging on, but we did get some of her babies, and we put them in an aquarium, and they do like the moisture. And so right now, they are still in that home of the aquarium, and we have not transplanted them yet. But we're interested in growing the conservatory into a multi-climate greenhouse. So that way, because currently they are under all one roof. And being that we have the cactus and the kratom and then salvia, they kind of all have different climates. And so we are working towards being able to bring it specific to each plant. But they're doing all right.
Great. That's really cool. That's, as soon as I started digging in on shows like Psychedelic Salon way back, I was like, this is what I want, is this like shaman's garden of all of these plants and, to be able to share it too. It's like, you've got this huge value and it's easily shared. It's not like proprietary genetics or something,
And with each event that we've done, so we've put on a kratom event, we also put on a CBD event, and at both events, we've been able to bring the plant to the event and have a moment where we are able to gather around the plant and just kind of be with it and the presence of it and the energy of the plant. And I think that that's an opportunity to bring kind of the mental side into like the physical form of it all. So it's been nice.
That's really great.
Yeah, and most of our events have been community driven as well. Like when I think back to our Kratom awareness event that we had, that was really in response to a lot of people were coming to us saying, hey, there's, this plant that's being sold and my friend is using it, or this is like, what do you guys know about it? And we had been compiling research for about a 3-year period on all aspects of, the debate, from the health side to the politics side, to the biography side, to the science side. And so we had a nice little info packet that we could just share with folks and say, hey, based off of what we've been listening to and hearing and gathering, here's what you can most likely assume with this plant. And we found out that organic information collection turned into local legislators saying, yeah, this thing doesn't seem that bad. We should probably protect it for the future.
So like at the city council level, or what kind of government level?
That happened at the Senate level, actually.
Wow.
So I was surprised. There's an opioid crisis that's still ongoing. And for a lot of people, we found here, a lot of people, that the jump from an opioid addiction to, something like iboga or, experiments with deeper psychedelics, so to speak, might be too big of a jump for some folks to make. So we really made the case and explained that this can actually act as a buffer as we move psychedelic science as a whole forward, that can help some of these communities that may otherwise just fall off the edge completely. The opioid and fentanyl suicide rates, death rates are just still incredibly high. So we saw Kratom is filling this niche that as we move this whole field forward, in terms of things like iboga and psilocybin and ayahuasca, that Kratom had this potential to kind of let people not, this is my Hippocratic oath thing, first do no harm. Don't let people die, okay? Kratom doesn't kill, opioids can and do. So if we can at least get that basic foundation laid, we feel that was a good service to the community.
And the feedback we got from that event, for that event, somebody had donated a lot of Kratom that we were able to give at the event. And with that, we had different practices. So in the middle of the event, after some people presented and gave the medical side of it and gave information around it, if people chose to take Kratom, they were able to. And then we had 4 different practices that people were able to explore in relationship with this plant. And so we offered meditation, yoga, qigong, art, and then also a topic discussion group. So those that didn't want to be more embodied were able to be more in the mental speech side of it. And the feedback we got were that most individuals were able to settle into whatever the practice was with more ease. And if they had any existing pain, it was lessened, and they were able to feel more of their body and different places of their body, and be able to relax muscles in different areas. And for me, that's what I'm very much interested in. I'm interested in this integration. I'm interested in this relationship between the humans and the plants. And because what is being spoken about a lot is these health benefits that come from plants. And we can see that sometimes scientifically with these studies, but really our own experience is just as much a kind of a voice to these benefits. And so it was something that we were able to get from the event, and something we look to continue in each event, that we have these different practices and we've got the plant there for people to participate in and to be able to start helping people understand the relationship on their own experience.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, when you guys first reached out about talking about Kratom, or some people pronounce it Kratom, I don't know, it's been interesting. We haven't really touched it too much on psychedelics today here. And so I was, actually kind of really excited to chat about it. I know it's kind of outside the psychedelic scope, but, it sounds like an interesting approach like you kind of have taken. There's this opiate epidemic, but, we can't really explore mushrooms and ibogaine and whatnot. But here's a plant that could be kind of beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the background of it is it's in the coffee family. It's not part of the poppy family. So it has stimulatory qualities. And the major distinguishing feature between it and the opioids is that it doesn't affect the respiratory system.
Right.
So most people, it sounds like but most people end up dying from slowed respiration. I mean, that's the primary cause of opioid death. So if you have this plant that gives somewhat similar pain relief and has a stimulatory property and doesn't slow down the respiration, generally speaking, that's safer. And I'm not going to say that I don't think it has any addictive properties, because it's still a pain reliever. And in some ways, I always feel something that its primary function is pain relief has that kind of drift in it. But through the practices that we're offering in the education, we're really trying to put the emphasis on this is really just the first step in a larger botanical pathway, potentially.
Right.
And at the same time, you can actually maybe engage with some of these meditative or bodywork practices, even though you're in pain. That can be a step for people as well. So it isn't the most popular thing, and we do a lot of work to keep the education as current as possible with it. But it's a different approach. Some states have just outright banned it.
Right.
Cities have banned it. And I think, Kratom to CBD with THC, this spectrum of expansion, so to speak, I think Kratom has a place in there.
Yeah.
I'm curious, just like a couple small technical questions on Kratom. So I know that people are using it to help them detox from opiates on their own. And it's obviously an opiate agonist for some reason. And I'm curious, we know there's no real upper limit where you can die from this stuff for the most part. And, people can get addicted to anything. Like Gabor Mate is addicted to buying classical music on CD. And
Right.
he writes about it at length. He hides it from his wife. So
Not anymore.
right, I bet. He's out of the closet on that one. So like when you've been taking kratom for a few months, like at a medium dose, do you offhand know if there's this kind of withdrawal effect that some people might get from pills, like opiate pills?
I have heard reports, and I think statistically it's similar to people that would withdraw hard from coffee. About
Right.
10 to 15% of people will. Right. So.
Right. So the symptoms are similar to if you drink a lot of coffee and then you take a break from it. There's headaches that generally comes, maybe some feelings of like angst or anxiety or anger, frustration, but nothing too extreme.
Yeah. I have a friend that, you're talking about the addictive potential, and he definitely says he's addicted to it. I mean, he used to be addicted to opioids, and so he's always like, I want to stop using this stuff, and he has expressed various different types of withdrawal. And I don't know whether that's just like psychological in the sense of like he just really likes the feeling and he's been addicted to this stuff for a while. Particularly like opioids in the past. And it's just, it's great to have this alternative. He says he never even thinks about using opioids because he's able to use something like Kratom. But it's always in the back of his mind where he's like, I don't want to just like be a slave to it in a sense, but I feel like I'm also kind of addicted to that feeling.
But how much of a improvement is being a kratom addict to an opiate addict? You can buy it. You can buy it safely. And you can't OD. Like two huge improvements.
Yeah.
Improvements. And at the same time, it is a plant, and the benefits that come from it can be harnessed with a practice. And when one starts working along with a practice, then they can start to realize that they can have these states of being for a longer period of time without the kratom. And then it can be more of just like I'm feeling like I could use the insight that comes from kratom, or I could use that feeling that comes from kratom and then take it and then go back into a practice and work with it. And so it doesn't have to be a dependency on the kratom. If you can be able to build that relationship in a way that is more geared towards being empowered, self-empowered.
Right. And I think that's kind of like a foreign concept to a lot of people. Like that makes sense to me, have a relationship with a plant and understand like, really what you're doing with it and have a practice with it. But I think that's a really foreign concept to a lot of people. And like, I guess, could you give an example of like what a practice would be like for something like kratom or just a plant in general? And
well, maybe I can share. I think it's a really good point because it is a somewhat foreign concept. And one of the things that we had to do with kratom was in terms of helping tell the story from the plant's point of view, so to speak, was that, and we can kind of bring it to a scientific point of view here in a sense. We have at least 3 centers of intelligence. We have the cognitive level here. We have a whole bunch of neurotransmitter systems. We have our gut, our microbiome area, which has a lot of intelligence as well. And then we have our heart, and in traditional Chinese medicine, they'd say this is actually your real brain. So, we have 3 brain systems here. And a lot of the legislative work that we looked at with Kratom was saying, we want to protect the whole plant, but that doesn't necessarily mean extractions and refinements and engaging in these processes to pull out the quote unquote essence of the plant. And the reason is we had a Kratom Consumer Protection Act that went up to Oregon legislator. And the rationale behind this was that the way Kratom is currently offered to individuals is in the bulk plant form. So essentially, when you take this, you're making into a tea. And 1, you're engaging your cognitive. How much am I taking? 2, you have to pass through this barrier. And this is a big difference between, say, drinking ayahuasca and smoking pure vaporized DMT. There's this intelligence here that. Oh, sure. Sorry to say we're on a podcast, right? your taste buds. They are going to alert and send out a cascade of signals across your body. And then when it hits your stomach, same thing. So when we bypass this intelligence, we may lose something. So all of our efforts have been to really explain to people, you're going to work with this plant. The best way to get to know it is to take it through a tea form and actually let all the different intelligence centers of your body experience that. And there have been cases where people are now refining it or saying, oh, here's a 10x Kratom extract, or here's a tincture we made of it, with alcohol or something. And in all cases, I get worrisome sensations, because if we go into that route, that almost drifts us towards a more opioid-like approach. And so it really is incumbent, if people are going to work with this as a plant, and people that feel like they may be addicted, one, to really remember, don't go to an extract to get more of that boost. And if you're reaching a point that you feel that you have plateaued or that you're quote unquote addicted, that the effort now is to move forward towards something. Perhaps if you're dealing with pain, it would be CBD is a nice alternative. I've talked to lots of elderly folks in the community that were on opioids, got onto Kratom, and then tapped into CBD, and they're feeling like 10 to 15 years younger at this point, where they were before that encounter on a downward opioid trend. And this happens a lot. So when I see Kratom's application in the community, I'm thinking too, for individuals that are older, that may not have a lot of psychedelic experience, or that are on this trend of physical pain. I'm in my older years. My doctor wants to give me opioids for pain. I had an injury or something. So in all cases, we're encouraging folks to, and I'm not saying we're encouraging anybody to use it per se, but if you're going to, focusing on the whole botanical and letting the 3-part intelligence of your body really inform that relationship will keep you, I think, in some ways safer than going the other direction.
And then to utilize what that energy that comes, and also the pain, kind of like the softening of the pain. So when that happens, then, focus in what part of myself is this plant serving a function for? Do I have knee problems, or do I have back pain? And okay, I'm feeling my pain less, and I have some more energy. So what can I do to start helping improve my own health at this moment? And so whether that be maybe doing some yoga or some gentle stretching, or even just going on a walk, or or rubbing some CBD on your knees and then doing some joint work. And so it's utilizing this, what the plant is offering, to then actually have our own ways of trying to heal what the plant is helping, what ailment we have. And that's the practice. And and maybe we feel like when we have Kratom, we feel like our mind is racing, right? Because coffee, I know for me, if I have a little too much coffee or coffee at all, my mind tends to race. And so at that, what if I take 5 minutes of just focusing my attention on one thing? And that can be my breath, or that can be a focal point. And then when I feel that, when I'm not on Kratom, if I end up feeling that anxious energy or that speedy energy just from maybe a situation that I'm in that feels heightened for myself, that I can tap back into that practice, because I've used a plant and I've been able to say, oh, I've had this experience before, I can use this now. Or if I'm at work and I'm feeling some joint pain, oh, okay, I've worked on this. I've taken the time to work on a practice that can help my joints right now. And so bringing those together, that would be the practice.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
So maybe in some ways, I'm thinking of an analogy here to make it succinct as well. In the same way that maybe some people utilize VR to augment psychedelic experiences, this might be a model of augmenting body work or physical practices with these botanicals.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking right now, Kyle, about like your potential involvement in
somatic work with folks, leveraging your training with something like a kratom or, a low-dose salvia or something, that could be a really interesting way to open up, like even cannabis too. Like that would be a really interesting way to investigate that field. That's one of the exciting things, right? We're on the frontier of like decades of more research that needs to be done in so many different fields. And, citizen science is alive and well and can really make a difference for humans.
Right.
I'm curious if y'all have any kind of like research projects ongoing as part of the organization.
Well, we did have. We're not currently recruiting right now, but we have run programs in the past, and I think the one as relates to this conversation is around Kratom. That we were able to generate some pretty decent scientific evidence to show that one, that it's generally safe. Two, that it has a fairly predictable response in individuals. And three, that there was a legal reason that we should be protecting it within the state. Oh, this was working with Kratom.
Right.
So the details of the study?
Yeah.
I can send you guys a slideshow or a PowerPoint of it.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah.
We worked with someone who studies the brain waves with the EEG. And then we had participants who took Kratom, and then they went in with a session with them, and he was able to map the brain waves.
Cool.
And, it was pretty interesting. And we were able to use that also when we went and had someone speak at the Senate.
I had this idea for like a similar study because of my position and what we're doing with psychedelics today. I can't do this, but it would be very interesting for somebody with an EEG machine to do something with, however many different people they can get to smoke DMT while attached or something. And just having that baseline data would be pretty incredible, because I think most of our data is like IV from Strassman, and that's really not that much data. So there's plenty of research left to do with all of these things, right?
Right.
We were chatting with a guy last night from Los Angeles who is doing a very similar thing with essential oils and like different blends. And he said frankincense had the most unique and powerful signature out of any of the essential oils he studied so far, which is really interesting. So I bought some last night, so we'll see what happens.
Nice.
Cool.
Nice. Yeah. Frankincense definitely has a history.
Quite the history, yeah.
Yeah.
So where to from here? I know there was a number of things you wanted to hit.
Was there anything about Kratom that you wanted to wrap up with before moving on, or?
I would just reemphasize the points that we made. The whole botanical is generally safer. This point about the 3-part intelligence, and then, about a practice to help integrate all of that. I think those are the three.
And that it's not an opioid.
Right.
Not part of that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that is a kind of a misconception. People call it an opiate, but it just, it just affects the opioid receptors in the brain. The mu opioid receptor, I believe.
Right, that's right. So it affects that receptor, but it doesn't affect the pathways that have any impact on the respiration system.
Right.
So your breathing rate never changes, which when you just think about that, even from one, that it's in the coffee plant stimulant, and two, that if your breathing isn't affected and you don't have pain, your motivation is likely to get up off of the couch versus stay on the couch. You feel good, you feel light, you have energy, and you have a little coffee boost too. So
right.
People, I've worked in the chemical addiction treatment field, and I've worked with clients that were using methadone, and in this process of them helping them get back into the workforce or become, I've noticed it's a really hard thing to have to go to a methadone clinic every day. And they're around the whole country. People get into this spiral of kind of circling around that as their central nexus for pain relief. And when I see them transition to Kratom, it's remarkable. I mean, people can actually be free in that sense versus circling around this clinic somewhere that's just central downtown. So, yeah, I think botanicals, integration practice, and realizing that you have these 3 intelligence centers that can really influence and inform your decision-making process.
Yeah. Awesome. And then I guess like maybe on a harm reduction sense, if people are listening to this and they're interested in exploring this, not encouraging it, right? But, people are curious. Any like recommendations on how to maybe source good kratom? Because I don't know. Yeah, like you said, the extracts, like, my friend goes to these gas stations. I'm like, do you even know what's in there? These things are like so unregulated. And it's funny that you said the bulk. I mean, I don't know how many bulk kratom people have friend requested me on Facebook. I'm like, where are these people coming from?
Right.
But yeah, so, it's just an interesting market. People can get it anywhere. And I'm just wondering if there's just kind of from a harm reduction standpoint of like
I think from that perspective, any person that you're purchasing from, if that's the route that you're going, they can be tested. I mean, there's industry standards, and there's companies that test to at least cannabis level testing and or above, all the way, for heavy metals, for all kinds of. So I would suggest right now that from what I'm looking at, it's highly unregulated, and really you're taking a risk. And that if you can't go to somebody and say, what, has this been tested? At least the basic testings, it's potentially suspect. There have been cases where other opioids of the synthetic kind have been mixed in to these products and then sold as is the botanical. And so when we looked at it from here in Oregon, we said, if we enact this, testing will be part of the protections for this.
Oh, awesome.
We said, people have to know what it is. And it's obvious that if there's no oversight of any way, shape, or form, people do the race to the economic bottom. Well, let's put a little fentanyl in here, really diluted and spread it across. And next thing you know, people are taking that. And we have an FDA that has been engaged in a fairly aggressive anti-information campaign, I would say, really highlighting these really drastic risks that could be involved. And really ignoring all of the anecdotal and some of the scientific evidence that shows, hey, this is a whole different situation than opioids. So they haven't been helpful. And the states are just finally starting to recognize, there may be a public health benefit to having some kind of safe, testable access to this plant in our lexicon of treatment options.
So I would say just make sure that you have the information from the company you're getting it from or the person you're getting it from. They definitely, there are companies out there testing it, cool. and high quality testing. Yeah.
Awesome. Good to know.
It's certificate analysis.
Yeah,
some of the things I've seen, I'm just like, I don't know about that. You should probably double check what you're buying there.
Right.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Cool. So do we want to move on? I know I have down decrim nature and some policy stuff. Did we want to dig into that?
Yeah, sure. So I think I'll share a little bit of contextualization. I'm kind of a policy research geek in a way. So I feel like I've found some really interesting gems that I'd like to share with the community around why decriminalization nature is happening as a movement, why the funding tends to drift more towards the scientific patented direction when it comes to things like psilocybin and MDMA. And so here's the piece that I think is important to share with the community. And it goes all the way back to, is it okay to go into this kind of like really niche area of law and policy?
Yeah, please do. We'll stop you if it gets to be too much.
Okay, cool. So in 1994, the World Trade Organization introduced this piece of legislation. And what it essentially said was that in U.S. patent law, minor scientific alterations to natural botanical plants can be patented. And they introduced this legislation, and I can have all this, I can help maybe send you in the show notes. We could get this up there for people to do further research. But anyway, what this legislation essentially said was that patent law protects scientific adaptations to botanicals, and therefore third world countries owe us, the United States, in royalties over $200 million for agricultural products, and also owes over, I think, $3 billion in pharmaceutical royalties. So essentially, they're saying that third world countries and botanicals, because they have alternative treatment methods, are directly stealing from U.S. scientific patent processes.
Jeez.
Now, in Canada, there was an organization called the Rural Advancement Initiative or Foundation, and they said, hold up, what if you flip those numbers around and you say that when somebody takes something from a plant and they patent that, that's actually taking from the third world and the indigenous. It's stealing their traditional knowledge and turning it into profit. When they calculated the numbers, they said, oh, actually, under this legislation, if we looked at it this way, the United States owes the indigenous and the third world countries upwards of $300 million in agricultural losses. And in terms of pharmaceuticals, they owe over $5 billion to these third world and indigenous cultures. So when I looked at these numbers, and mirror back if that doesn't make sense what I'm sharing, but essentially in our country, there is an economic motive to continuously focus and conduct research and make money on synthetic versions of the botanicals. And there's really no protection for the plants, or there's not an incentive to develop them. So when we look at psychedelic research in this country at this point, it's drifting very quickly to a medical model where it is synthetic refined, and there's really no research on the whole botanicals. So our entire organizational endeavor has been to begin research on the botanicals in response to the fact that there's not an economic incentive at any level within the United States patent system and under the World Trade Organization's agreements that, hey, this botanical research should stand on equal footing with the scientific medicalized research. And to this point, I haven't heard people talking about this because it happened in like 1994, and who thinks about stuff from 1994 except somebody who has their nose in a book for like 20 years researching this stuff, which I fit the profile there.
So I'm wondering how you're looking at funding for this. Like, obviously botanicals need to be researched. There's, as you state, nobody's really going to be funding that from the federal level. Like federally, they're not even getting funding for psychedelic research whatsoever. So like taking it slightly more back to our roots, like, plants, like nobody's really looking at funding anything like that as far as I know. So a nonprofit would really need to be the group doing that. And who would fund that nonprofit? It might make sense to reach out to different organizations offering services actively, legally with this stuff to say, hey, I know you're making money off this. Like, what do you think about funding some research with maybe you give us 1% of profits to do our research? And then it's free to everybody and stuff is further democratized from there. I don't know. How have you been looking at funding for the research?
Well, the specific language of the World Trade Organization is that they do not and the United States falls in this umbrella. The WTO does not recognize technology innovations by farmers, artisans, or grassroots innovators, which happen in an informal setup. However, they form a large part of traditional knowledge creation around the world through history. So what we've done as an organization is we partnered with indigenous groups here in Oregon, and in particular, we're affiliated with the Peyote Way Looking Glass Church here in Oregon, which was a church that was established under pre-European contact law. It's very exclusive to Oregon. And what it says is that this church is able to provide Schedule I plants to anybody of any race, and it stands outside of the Oregon statutes. Essentially, this group of people has been practicing this way of life before Europeans arrived, and therefore this church is established before the United States was essentially even formed. It's an indigenous religion. So
has that ever been challenged in court? Like after the American Indian movement kind of like settled down and the cops stopped shooting Native Americans like in the 70s, like has it been challenged since then at all? Or like has it just kind of existed?
It enjoys statewide protections and endorsement from the state level. So I shouldn't assume, but from what I've looked at, it stands in a similar legal category in the way the cannabis industry is. I mean, it's legal at the state level, but at the federal level, it still remains. However, this church at the federal level is recognized as well in terms of their everything that they've filed and that they're moving forward. So at this point, to me, how would I say, they're in a very unique position. And in order to participate in the church, you don't have to be of any particular race. However, if you want to work with the primary sacrament of the church, the peyote, you have to have a genetic testing to prove a certain level of indigenous connection.
Well, that's not ideal, but it's nice that exists. I just don't know. Like, so where were you going with that? Is that a possible, like that particular church, kind of like a funding angle, maybe?
Not necessarily a funding, but able to conduct research in terms of a partner and an affiliate. They have the ability to provide these plants.
Oh,
and
right.
Again,
so you could actually study a population actively using peyote in the States.
Right.
That's amazing.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
We're pretty excited about that as an opportunity because given all of the WTO and these trade agreements that I talked about earlier, this is part of the bigger systemic problem of why marginalized groups and indigenous groups don't have a voice in this enterprise for the most part. We're starting to hear about it at the MAPS level. People are starting to mention about, hey, there's other communities involved with psychedelics here. But what we're hoping our organization can do is create scientific evidence that validates and gives credence to the fact that we can do citizen-led research, we can generate authentic, accurate scientific information, and that in terms of intellectual property, there isn't a financial incentive, but we can return this wisdom back to the groups themselves.
And as for funding, we are volunteer based. Any funding that we get as of this point has just been from donors. And so, yeah, we don't have anybody behind us right now funding any of our citizen science research.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of like how does an organization like yours, which is doing and going to be continue doing really incredible research, like how do you pair up and how do you find that money? There are people with a vested interest and a commercial interest that would benefit from this research, and they're not necessarily doing it. Yeah. So, not like peyote's being super commercialized right now. It's kind of almost fringe in the psychedelic landscape for a lot of reasons and some very good ones. But yeah, it's a tough one. But groups need to just start picking it up and start doing the work. And it's great. Your team is doing it. Bill Kreutzmann, just kind of start bumping him like, hey, bud, you've been on tour long enough. Like, let's get some funding.
Well, and so as we move forward, and so we do have, yes, an affiliate with the peyote church. There's also the movement of decriminalization.
Oh, right.
And so, as that is not the best model, having, the peyote looking glass and that you have to have this native gene, that now there's Oakland who, has already moved forward with decriminalize, and then a number of other cities that are interested in this initiative as well. And I believe that as more cities are able to pass the decriminalization nature, that the citizen science research will open up for more people and more organizations. And so I'm strongly for decriminalized nature. I think that's a very important way to go. It protects indigenous. It protects pretty much everyone. And there's no reason that anybody should be criminalized for growing a plant. That's just it.
I wish the initiative would. I don't know how to make the best initiative possible. I'm just a media person, a critic, I follow, advocate, all that kind of stuff. But where's my protection for acid? Like I'm still going to jail for a long time, which is not the best. In decriminalized nature, the most valid critique I've heard, and I'm all for decriminalized nature. Like everybody should go for it. But think long term, perhaps it's not perfect. Like, for instance, it sets the stage for we're better than them. Those dirty drug users are not as good as us, like good plant users. Like crack cocaine addicts should continue to go to jail and be criminals when we shouldn't be. And it's a tough thing. It's a race thing. It's a class thing. It's a really complicated issue. And I'm sure y'all have thought about it plenty, but that's just something I wanted to get out. We don't need to go into that because that's a whole ball of wax. It could take, 8 weeks to unravel.
I just want to reflect back. I do think that's there's accuracy there in what you're saying. And, we've had discussions recently kind of around this topic and, how do you move everything forward? And I think what we're finding is there's this very unique interplay between the laws that we discussed earlier and then the local and the state and the federal levels, and these three levels trying to come into alignment to create a drug policy or a psychedelic policy or any policy is a really complex set of negotiations. And one of the things I've advocated for is the creation, and I'm not a statistician or, a policymaker or anything like that, but I've wondered if somebody could put together, in the same way that David Nutt put together a chart back in 2011 of drugs harm chart, could somebody put together a psychedelic policy or a drug policy chart that actually physically maps out the pros and the cons of a particular piece of legislation that represents plants and or drugs? And I mention this because I come from, and I have family that's in a state where when cannabis came to that state, it came by way of you can't grow your own. You can go to your doctor and get a prescription. It arrived through that model. And when I looked at it, I'm like, there's so many different kinds of legalization, because what legalization means here is drastically different than what it means here in Oregon, where you can grow, plants that you need. And when I looked at,
you can only grow 4.
I think 4 in Oregon.
That's tough. That's really tough. And what kind of legalization is that, right? Like you can only have you can only have 4 rolls of toilet paper. It's like, what are you talking about? Yeah.
So I was hoping, and the reason this came up was because, we had Oregon Psilocybin Society introduce an initiative here in Oregon. And the initiative originally said, this is a policy that will legalize psilocybin. And everybody said, what does that mean? Yeah. Okay, well, what it means is that we will legalize the mushrooms and the synthetic version of psilocybin for a therapeutic program. And we will decriminalize mushrooms, generally speaking. So reduce the penalties to as low as possible, and you can, so the original premise of the bill was you should never go to jail for picking a mushroom out of the ground or having a couple mushrooms growing in your house, just like cannabis, it's a botanical or it's a fungal species, and just chill out on stomping on plants.
So it's kind of like Denver's plus therapy being covered.
Yes.
That's really interesting.
But what happened was they subsequently changed the legislation, and this is just getting rolled out now, to that it actually removed all the decriminalization language, and it strictly said, it's just for therapy. So, and there'll be one single mushroom producing facility for the state of Oregon that's run by the Oregon Health Authority. And so everybody will have to come to this one mushroom grow place, basically, and then become licensed through that program. So you were talking earlier about the equity and the access piece and ending the drug war as a whole. And when I looked at that model, I thought, well, 1, it's going to be expensive. 2, it's fairly exclusionary. Not everybody has the means to come to Oregon to participate in that. And 3, what about the people, for example, folks that I know that just don't have money for that, and they would actually lose significantly if they couldn't have their own mushrooms to grow or go pick out in nature. So that potential conflict point between legalizing psychedelic therapy and keeping nature criminalized was a tension point that arose. And I think decriminalization of nature is this response to, in a way, the break, almost like a breakaway. We're medical, we're professional, we're psychedelic therapists, and we do it all through the government and through the state, which is what this initiative proposes, versus kind of a more communal, traditional, indigenous sharing culture around cultivating your own. As far as I know, decriminalize nature basically says that it allows for small personal growth and consumption, but there's not a commercialization of a market.
Right. Right. That's what we understand from talking to Larry Norris and some of his team members. Like, it's not, there's nothing you can commercialize. You're still getting deep shit for that.
Right.
And I don't know that there's firm numbers on that, but that's up for debate. So like hearing that, I'm like, okay, do you really want to say it's this way? There's so many complicated factors, right? Like, where does authority come from? Does authority come from nature, from God, from Ron Paul? Like, where does authority live? Like, I don't know. And like saying, oh, please, sir, may I practice my religion, and go through all these hoops? Like that seems somewhat fraudulent and like misled, maybe not fraudulent, right. Misled. And especially like medical, like there's a lot of things that we're going to have to sort out. There's no end of conflict, but hopefully we can remain civil and not too divided, because, once we start fracturing up into different factions, we don't have the same political will we had before, and
right.
Got to be careful.
So that's why I go back to this psychedelic policy pros and cons chart. Like, is there a way that we can just, not ideologically, but actually, just like David Nutt did for the drugs policy chart, could we really look at psychedelic policy from a perspective of equity and fairness? And I think that there's definitely a way to do that. It's just an emergent conversation, and I don't know if enough folks have really had the time or energy to look at the problem, because we're trying to move the field forward as a whole so much. Right. And we're doing fantastic, and it's moving forward. But it's just the piece that I would add in, that as we move forward, we're going to have to take that into greater and greater account. And so if there's any experts out there that would want to look at that as a meme or a research project, I think it's worth looking into.
I agree. It's interesting that Drug Policy Alliance hasn't put something out like that. I suppose they're looking at drug policy generally, not psychedelics specifically. So that's probably why.
Right.
But yeah, there's definitely policy people out there, and that would be amazing if somebody wanted to work on that and reach out to us or the EDELIC team, and we'll link you up. Cool. So we've been going for about an hour. Is there anything we want to fit in before we wrap?
How about you guys? Would you like to hear anything else?
So you're in Eugene, Oregon, which is Southern Oregon?
Central.
Okay.
Central
so you're on
Oregon.
like the east side of the mountains, essentially, like foothills maybe?
No, actually west side in the valley.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Great. And people can visit your garden? Is it open all the time, or just for special events?
So we have a public outreach office, we have a conservatory, and we have the research side of things. Now, they're all in different locations. So what we do is twice a week, we have our public outreach office open. People can come in, talk to volunteers, check out the library, and so we make appointments to the research and or the conservatory. That's kind of separate. And then every Saturday we do a film integration circle and library hours as well. And that's from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So we try to keep the public outreach office is essentially a window into the deeper research and conservation that we're engaged with. So that's really a way, if you're interested, to get connected with us and plug into what it is that we're doing. And like I said, most people self-identify what it is they think they can contribute to this. And then they come and say, hey, I really like to do this. And we kind of just run it by our team. And if it sounds like it's a good fit, we say, okay, well, let's give it a try. Let's see how it goes.
I would also like to add that Robert Jesse put together an open science and praxis document, which is where organizations, individuals can be signatories to openly share. That would be research, information, and we are signatories on that. And that I would like to see that other people in other cities, other places, start up their own nonprofits, because what we've found with ours is that there's a need for people to come together and to be able to talk and share and express ideas and not feel so alone during this time. And the feedback we've been given is that it's been greatly beneficial for each individual that has come, and that if anybody is interested in starting a nonprofit in their location, that we are happy to take questions and give answers and help individuals to be able to set up their own places of community gathering and support.
Awesome. And how can people get in touch with you? Where can people find you?
You can reach us at our website. It's www.edelic.org, edelic.org. And our email is team@ecfes.org. And so we're fairly easy to get in touch with, and we're around the community on a regular basis. So you can also just stop by and say hi if you're in the area.
Wonderful. I really hope to get out there someday. It'd be beautiful to get back to Oregon and to make it out to some place as beautiful as Eugene.
Great.
So thank you all for joining us, and hope to keep in touch.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.
And there you have it. Podcast with EDELIC Center for Ethnobotanicals Services. It was really fun. I really appreciate the work those two are doing, and I really want to have the same thing happen here. I would love to be involved with a place that starts as a library and then you have an ethnobotanical garden situation. Where I live, we need a really expensive greenhouse, unfortunately, but whatever. We'll get there eventually. So, yeah, what did you think? Let us know. Maybe have a conversation with us on Twitter. You can find us there, Instagram. We're on a lot of socials, so check us out. We've got a really booming group over on Facebook, 2,400 people. A lot of interesting conversation and peer support happening there. We moderate it carefully, so it's not just a spammy Facebook group where you get posts about stuff happening in Dallas. It's stuff that's happening that you can access from wherever you are. Like largely global stuff is what we like to promote in there, and just having conversations with the community. Really worthwhile, and come join us. So just search Psychedelics Today group and you'll find it. So yeah, leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you do your podcast stuff. Tell a friend. And if you want some more education, we've got another fall Navigating Psychedelics for Therapists and Clinicians coming up. So check us out, psychedelicstoday.com under online education. Thank you all for tuning in. This is Joe Moore signing off from Breckenridge, Colorado. Bye-bye.